Hello everyone, this is Jen and I make useful English Lit study videos on Shakespeare, poetry, fiction, literary devices and more to help you become a literary expert. So in today's video, we are analysing Shakespeare's sonnet number 130, which starts with the very famous line, "My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun." Now, it's a bit of an odd way to begin the poem because the speaker is pointing out how his lover's eyes are not as bright as the sun, which seems to come across more critical than celebratory or admiring in tone, which is a bit odd for a poem that seems to be about love and adoration, right? But if you've seen my other video analysis on sonnet number 18, which you can check out here if you haven't already, you'll know that a lot of these sonnets in the sonnet sequence aren't actually quite the love poems that they seem at first glance, or at least not just about love. Like Sonnet 18, Sonnet 130 isn't really about romantic adoration at all. Despite the ostensible subject matter of the poem being my mistress, and the entire poem seemingly being this elaborate description of a woman's beauty, or rather lack thereof. Because specifically, it's about how a woman's beauty doesn't quite measure up to conventional ideal standards of beauty. But if we dig deeper, we'll realise that it's probably not what the poem is really about. So in the rest of this video, I'm going to propose an alternative interpretation with my close reading. So let's dive straight into it. So it's quite obvious that this sonnet is riddled with similes and metaphors. But instead of drawing positive comparisons between the mistress's physical features and the conventional symbols of beauty, the speaker keeps saying how she falls short of the comparisons, i.e. the comparisons don't actually work on her because she's not beautiful enough. Ouch. He says, her eyes are nothing like the sun, her lips is red, isn't as vivid as that of coral, her breasts aren't as white as snow, her hair is unflatteringly compared to black wires, her cheeks aren't rosy enough, her breath reeks compared to perfumes, and her gait, when she walks, is heavy and matronly, not light and goddess airy. So we see then that every comparison that the speaker makes is made invalid with either a negative or relative marker, such as nothing like, no such roses see I, far more like, a far more pleasing sound. So the overall impression that we get about his mistress is that, frankly, she's just not very attractive or alluring at all. But despite all of this, the speaker concludes at the end of the poem that he loves her and loves her dearly, which shows that he values her not for her physical attractiveness, or at least doesn't see her attractiveness according to commonplace standards. Rather than making fun of his mistress for not being beautiful enough, the speaker could imply that those conventional tropes of courtly love and medieval blasphème poetry like sun, snow, roses, etc. are what falls short of capturing the entirety of his mistress's personhood and allure. This is reflected in the matter-of-fact calling a spade tone that overarches the poem, when the speaker acknowledges that roses and perfumes are both damasked and delightful in their own right, but to analogize them with a woman's complexion and scent seems to make no logical sense. And blasphème poetry is actually a kind of medieval verse that specifically compares a woman's body parts to many different tropes, and in a way is rather objectifying if you were to look at it from a 21st century kind of readership angle. But there you go, that's blasphème poetry for you. By the way, guys, if you find this video helpful so far, I'd massively appreciate it if you could hit the thumbs up button below and subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss out on any of my top grade lit study content going forward. I'd also encourage you to check out my membership program by clicking the join button below if you want exclusive access to members only study content and make special video requests. I'll see you there. So each of these bodily tropes then diminishes the woman to being a single part of what is otherwise a united whole, right? Because we're all, as humans, a complex organic whole. And this reductive approach to evaluating a woman's beauty and worth is something that the speaker himself scorns. So the implication is that by making these hyperbolic comparisons between objects and human is unhelpful, because no inanimate thing, however wonderful or delightful, can ever embody the multi-dimensional organic being that is a living human. Now, the frequent use of repetition in the sonnet also shows the limitations of language in describing the full extent and essence of a woman's beauty. Now, the awareness of linguistic limitation probably has happened to anyone who's ever been at a loss for words while writing, because when we can't find the right word, we tend to just repeat ourselves and rehash those words we've already used. There are 3 instances of close repetition in lines 2, 4 to 6, where Coral is described as being far more red than her lips is red. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head, and I have seen roses damasked, but no such roses see I in her cheeks. And if you want a more technical term for the sort of close interspersed repetition, it's called diacope. But anyway, these references are perhaps repeated to illustrate the point that while colour, red, objects, wires, and flowers, roses, are static and unchanging in their quality, a woman is a much more dynamic and interesting organism, whose beauty isn't one-dimensional or defined by a single trait. As such, it would seem silly and reductive to compare his mistress to any of these references, because they are so fundamentally different in both depth and nature. So what's also ingenious about the sonnet is the speaker's subtle humour. In his light teasing of his mistress's seeming imperfections, in fact, his adoration for her comes across all the stronger. For example, this comes through in the slant rhyme of reeks and speak, as the sonic alignment of the 2 words suggests that he is magnetised and not repulsed by his mistress. The idea being that I love to hear her speak despite the fact that her breath reeks. Another instance would be the sound-ground alternate end rhyme, which pairs the contradictory ideas of more pleasing sound and treads on the ground, which would be a kind of unpleasant cacophonous thump-thump, and he couples these contradicting ideas in a wry irony and in sonic harmony. So the message of love, despite flaws, is once again suggested in these references, i.e., my mistress's footsteps may be heavy and matronly, but I love her regardless because she is much more than just this one attribute. Now, my final observation of the sonnet relates to the meter of the penultimate line. In an otherwise perfect sonnet, at least perfect in terms of meter and rhyme, line 13 stands out with the word rare protruding at the end. Considering the connotation of this word and the message of this line, it would make sense that form and content should align here, because just like this singular special line, the speaker's love for his mistress is unique in its depth, because perhaps in society, it is rare that there would be men like him who can see beyond a woman's physical flaws and to embrace her wholeness. It's interesting to note that whereas tropes and metaphor, which are verbal expressions, are revealed to be lacking in their descriptive power when it comes to embodying and capturing a woman's beauty, as we see in the comparisons failing to capture the mistress's beauty throughout the poem, it is in structure and meter, which are these non-verbal expressions, that the rareness of the mistress and the speaker's love for her is relatively more effectively conveyed. So going back to our premise that this sonnet is really a reflection on the power and limits of poetic craft, perhaps in addition to satirizing the cliched use of conventional love tropes, Shakespeare is actually also highlighting the creative flexibility of verse as a medium that allows for communication via verbal, visual and formal modes of expression. So really, instead of this poem being just a celebration or a satire of love and romance, it is also ultimately a celebration of the poetic craft. And there you go, guys. That's my close reading of Sonnet 130, which I hope you found interesting and insightful. For your next video, I recommend that you watch my analysis of Sonnet 116 if you haven't already, or check out my analysis of the other sonnets in my Shakespeare Sonnet playlist, which you can check out here. As always, make sure to hit the thumbs up button below if you want to encourage me to keep making these useful lit study videos for you and other passionate lit learners all around the world. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss out on any of my weekly videos down the line. You can also consider joining my membership program if you want to make exclusive video requests or gain access to one-on-one essay review perks. You can check all of that out in the description box below. But otherwise, I will see you in the next video. Bye!